Bailey and I met a couple of guys here at AirVenture who were so inspiring. We just had to have them on our show, and we're going to talk to them today in the hangar. Welcome to In the Hangar. I'm Christy Schaefer.
And I'm Bailey Ward.
We are here on location at the Flying Ice booth here at AirVenture on this lovely, cool day.
I know, right? I almost feel a little chilly.
I had to put on my cardigan, actually. And we're here with two amazing individuals. I begged Dan, we have to have these guys on the show.
Yes.
I'll do all the work. I'll edit the video. Just let me. I'm just kidding. Dan's editing.
Can we get that on record?
Yeah. But we've got Adrian and Rick with us, and you guys are incredible. We're going to talk about why in just a minute. But how are you guys?
Fantastic. Doing great, man. It's a beautiful day at Oshkosh.
All right. So first and foremost, where do you guys live? Where are you from?
Washington, D.C. area.
Okay.
And Flower Mound, Texas, near Dallas.
Texas. Yeah, all right. Yeah, you're right down the street from me. Well, we just happened to meet up at a dinner the other night, and we got into a group, and we just started talking. And it was just
the rest is
amazing.
history. No.
It was incredible. So let's just start talking about that.
Yeah, it was pretty neat, and it's thanks for having us here. This is my 35th year at AirVenture.
Oh, wow.
The only year that I didn't make it was COVID, obviously. And
right.
We were here in spirit.
Yep,
yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, it's kind of neat because when I came here, I was an inspiring pilot, an inspiring aviator, and pretty much everything that motivated me to do the things that I've done in aviation really came from here, from the people that come, the Fellowship of Airmen over the years, and met Rick when I was a first officer at JetBlue. He was a captain, and we realized right off the bat we were right out of the same mold, and that was probably close to 15 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. We met there at JetBlue, and we both had a passion for aviation. My passion for GA didn't really start till a lot later in life. I was first a military pilot in the Air Force for 22 years.
Wow.
And then joined JetBlue and did that for 20 years, retired just recently due to the age 65 rule. But I got into GA because my father owned a Cherokee, and as he was getting older and couldn't fly it anymore, he was going to hand it off to me. So I inherited that Cherokee about 8 years ago, and
cool.
and started going to Oshkosh. I'm on my 4th year camping out with the airplane, and
you camp with the airplane.
There you go.
See, that's new information. I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
cool. Oh, that's hardcore. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I love Oshkosh because of the big reunion that it is, plus getting to see all the interesting planes here and products and things like that.
Yeah, definitely the people. But
I'll just comment on his comment about being a military pilot. He wasn't just a military pilot.
I was going to
He
say,
felt
here we
the
go.
stealth
Here we go.
fighter.
Let's go
Here we
there.
go. It
I
wasn't
remember
it.
meeting Rick at the gate, and when two pilots meet at the gate, as well, you know, it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
the 5 questions: where you been, how long you been here, what, you know, do you like it, and such. And you know, stealth fighter pilot, Air Force Academy grad. And I thought, well, I was an Army guy, and you know, flew a couple jets, and got happy to be hired. But we had a riot, and it doesn't matter what your background is. There's so much passion, so many interesting stories, and yeah. So it's pretty great.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about y'all's background in military. I know you guys have done some really cool stuff and have flown some really cool airplanes.
Yeah, so I heard the word stealth,
Yeah, right?
stealth fighter. Let's talk about that.
All right. So first off, I'm a Navy brat, son of a Navy test pilot and carrier pilot. So my dad was went through test pilot school in the early 60s. And then he, one of his big projects was to help to do the carrier qualifications on the Vigilante, the A5 Vigilante, which was a big carrier-borne jet that was supposed to be a nuclear strike airplane.
Oh, wow.
And around the same time frame, my dad also applied to the astronaut program and was a runner-up for the Gemini program.
Oh my gosh.
So he was friends with, you know, a lot of the Pete Collins, a lot of the astronauts that ended up going to the moon with
My dad's
Apollo and
friends are
stuff like
astronauts,
that.
no
Yeah,
big
no
deal.
biggie.
So I grew up around airplanes. I grew up kind of all over the world, born in San Diego. Then we went to Pax River, Maryland, where my dad went through the test pilot school. Florida, Alabama, France, Germany, Naval Academy at Annapolis, where he was an instructor, and then we went out to China Lake, California, where he retired from, where he was flying operational testing on weapons and things like
my.
that. So I just grew up, you know, saturated and marinated in aviation. And then I was big into model planes, remote control planes and things like that. Then pumped gas on the ramp for $2 an hour when I was a teenager. Got to be around GA planes a lot doing that. And then after high school graduation, I went to the Air Force Academy.
So you knew from an early age that you were going into flying.
Yeah.
One way or another.
Yeah. And
Okay.
then Air Force Academy, I ended up getting in the soaring program there and flying gliders and becoming a CFI in gliders when I was
Oh,
about
wow.
19 years old, and I taught my
Oh,
fellow
I
cadets
keep
Is
learning
that
more
cool
and more
or what?
how
about
to
you.
fly.
Yes.
I never knew that.
Yeah, see?
And then really no GA. I never got a private license, but I did have to go up through solo in a T-41, a Cessna 182, and then off to pilot training. Del Rio, Texas, flew the T-37, the T-38 out there in Del Rio. Upon graduation, I was assigned to the F-4 Phantom. So
Wow.
I went through another about 2 years of training to get combat ready in the F-4. And I had assignments in the F-4 in the Philippines, Clark Air Base, Philippines, where I got to see the whole Far East, South Korea, Okinawa, Thailand. And it was a really good way for a early on pilot to gain experience, because there wasn't a lot of supervision like back here
Oh
in the
my.
States. So you had a lot of
That could be
freedom.
a whole other episode
Yeah,
where we
Yeah.
just talk about the shenanigans with the F4.
Yeah, a lot of freedom there. And then so I was at Clark for a year and a half, and then I went back to Seymour Johnson, North Carolina, another operational tour in the F4, became an instructor and a functional check pilot, and flew the F4, did a lot of red flag exercises, things like that. And then I was assigned out to George Air Force Base, Victorville, California, to be a instructor pilot in the F4. And I taught the RTU, the replacement training unit. So I taught new pilots how to fly. The interesting part of that job is that our squadron taught Luftwaffe pilots, taught
Wow.
German pilots
Oh, that's interesting.
under contract with the German government, because the U.S. has great weather. So out in Southern California, Mojave Desert area. So I taught Germans to fly the F4 for 3 years.
Isn't that something? And then-
Unbelievable, isn't
yeah,
it?
right? And then you wound
Unbelievable.
up, but you did wind up in the 117.
Yeah. So from George Air Force Base, when I was the F4 instructor, I applied twice unsuccessfully to become a test pilot, and I didn't make the cut. So then I knew about the F-117. It had gone public and been acknowledged in 1988, and this was around 1989. And after I didn't make test pilot school, I decided to try for the F-117. So I applied to the program. At the time, it was a selection process versus just getting assigned it, you know, like other airplanes. So I had to turn in a resume and things like that. You had to have a minimum of 1,000 hours in some other fighter plane to go to the 117. And I had 1,800 hours in the F4 at the time. So I applied to it. I had a couple of Vietnam vets in my squadron who knew one of the supervisors over at the F-117 wing. So they put in a word for me. And an interesting story about the selection is I was kind of waiting to hear if I made it or not. And this supervisor of the 117s from Tonopah, name is Klaus Klause. And
Oh,
he
wow.
actually flew, he was, you know, German born, but he was a naturalized American and full colonel. And he had flown in Vietnam. He actually had one kill in Vietnam against a MiG. And he was going to come to our base to give a talk about the F-117. So, you know, and I heard about it last minute. So I called my wife and said, we're going to this dinner. I want to go, you know, ask questions and see this guy and find out more about the airplane, because I tried to dig up all the information I could about the airplane. And there wasn't a lot out there. So Klaus came and gave a talk over dinner, and people asked him a few questions after as the dinner was breaking up. I went up to him and I said, "Sir, I don't know if you know me or not. I'm Captain Wright, and I've got my name in for the 117. Have you guys made the selection yet?" And he said, "Yeah, we just had the board today and you're in."
Oh,
So that was a good dinner.
I
That's a
found
good
Yeah,
out,
right?
yeah, at this dinner that I had been selected for the program, and then after that, well, prior to that selection, they had a public unveiling of the airplane at Nellis Air Force Base.
Wow.
And where they flew the first two in and showed them to the public, and that fly-in was mainly for the families of the 117 personnel who, up till that time, were not allowed to talk about the fact they were flying this special
Wow,
airplane.
wow.
So I drove over from Southern California over to Vegas, and I saw the first two come out
Wow.
and do the public unveiling, and I've always been fascinated with the airplane, and then I got to fly it after that. So
What's it like to fly the 117?
it actually is, it flies like, it has a fly-by-wire flight control system, so no mechanical connection between the stick and the control surfaces. There are 4 flight control computers that take the input of the pilot and look in the environment you're flying in, and then decide how much to move the flight controls. But it's happening like thousands of times a second. So to the pilot, you do the normal things you do in a jet airplane. So it flew like any other jet, except it didn't have afterburners. So it was a low thrust to weight ratio, something like the F-16, the F-35 out here. They have greater than 1-to-1 under a lot of conditions when they're lightly loaded and things like that. So I had a 0.4-to-1 thrust to weight
Oh my
ratio
gosh.
in the 117, and we
Wow.
were based in at a 4,000 foot elevation field in White Sands, New Mexico at Holloman, and our takeoff rolls would be about 45 seconds long and
Wow.
about 7,000 to 8,000 feet at the high density altitude we were at.
That's got to be quite the resume, like filler though, when you're applying to JetBlue. They're like, okay, yep,
Yeah.
all right, yep, 117 pilot, okay.
Yeah.
And Adrian, so you had a completely different experience. So your story is very different than Rick's, because you didn't really grow up in aviation and you didn't get to do aviation but you wanted to.
That's correct.
All right, let's talk about that.
My dad was Army Air Corps, then Army, and I got the bug when I was 8 years old, and knew that I wanted to fly. Never did that well in high school and in college, because I didn't have a passion for the subjects that were being taught. I was a civil engineering major in college, and it was great. It was something to do. But I thought, I'm going to go into Army ROTC, become a helicopter pilot, follow in my dad's steps. So got commissioned, and then the Army decides you're going into the Army Corps of Engineers. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go into Corps of Engineers. I want to be
Right.
a pilot. And they go, no, we need you as a Corps of Engineer guy because you have a degree in civil engineering. And it's like, well, I want to be a pilot. And they said, well, you're too smart to be a pilot. We need you in the... And I said, well, first of all, I am not too smart. So you got that wrong. So I realized after 4 years that the Army was not going to send me to flight school. So I ended up staying in 21 years, had a phenomenal career. But the only thing in the Army that I got to fly was when I went to airborne school and Ranger school was to fly a parachute. So I got thrown out of airplanes
Yes.
and flew a parachute.
So cool.
Army Ranger. Very
Yeah.
cool, by the
Yeah.
way. Continue.
And so then I started flying on my own. I was in a tent up on the DMZ with an engineering project, and went down to Osan to get some parts from the Air Force. Joined the flying club, got my Jeppesen program text, went back up to my tent and started studying, and then
You
that
stuck it to the Army and said, I'm flying anyway.
I
Yep.
did.
I mean,
but,
honestly.
But kept getting really interesting assignments, and ended up staying in. And while I was on active duty, I think from 85 to 2000 when I retired, I had over 5,000 hours. A lot of
Wow.
teaching,
Wow.
flying anything I could. There's a lot of interesting things. And then finally retired in 2000 and got hired. And I was flying for the owner of the Washington Redskins, flying a Challenger 604, on a beeper for a little over 2 years, and realized this is fun, but I need a life. Got hired by General Dynamics and flew a G4 for them for a while, then went to the FAA and got to fly November 1.
That's incredible.
Yeah, the FAA's flagship was painted just like the 89th airplanes, United States of America, blue belly. And we flew all the presidential cabinet members that the 89th that Andrews did not fly. Went all over the world. We had agreements with 26 different government agencies, from the attorney, all the folks, Health and Human Services, you name it, the Marshal Services. So we went all over the world. I could probably write a chapter in a book for every week that I was there. I got to fly Neil Armstrong.
Oh my gosh.
35th anniversary of the space mission. Picked him up in Cincinnati.
You
brought
really
him to
stuck it to the Army.
Yep, flowing prisoners. We would extradite high-profile prisoners out of Bogota and out of Europe and Afghanistan, bring them back. The really high-profile guys that the Marshal Service wouldn't put on airlines. So, fascinating job.
Okay.
Type-rated in a G4, a G3, and a Citation at the same time. We had a G3 that belonged to NASA, so we used to go over to Moscow, pick up astronauts, and bring them home because they weren't coming home on the Soyuz. So the last guy that I brought home was a U.S. Astronaut by the name of Phillips, and a Russian that had spent 2 years in space. So we flew to Moscow, brought him back to Washington. He got on the other jet and went to Ellington. They wanted to get him to do medical tests as soon as possible. So storybook job. And it was great, but I was flying too much, and I love flying, but it was cutting into my GA time.
Yeah,
Right.
it
And,
does that.
Right.
I thought,
working does
Yeah.
that.
I don't want to give up giving seminars, teaching, and doing maintenance and all that, so went to JetBlue.
Okay.
And 15 best years of my life. I mean, I loved it. And
So,
like Rick, I got kicked out at age 65. 4 years, 2020.
Yeah.
So sad.
well, you stayed in GA as well.
Yeah.
You own a very cool airplane.
Yeah,
you
let's
are,
talk
you
a
guys
little
are
bit
like
more
the most
about that.
fascinating people ever. 'Cause let's
Well.
talk about your Bonanza.
Well, the Bonanza I bought back in 1990. I had a loan from my dad for $5,000. Bought it for I think $35,000 because I had paid off all my flight training bills because Uncle Sam didn't fund any of it.
Right.
So bought the Bonanza and started working on it and took it up to a level where last year it won Grand Champion here. And along the way, just decided to stay in the Bonanza community, teaching Bonanzas, repair Bonanzas, got my A and P and I, and focus and not be a jack of all trades, to just stay and work on Bonanzas. And then I decided I had a bad weekend. I came here to Oshkosh, and shortly after that, my sister passed away on a Friday. My mother passed away on a Monday, and I needed something to get my mind off of the sorrow of that because my father was gone. So now I'm an orphan. So I had always had the thought about flying around the world. And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. I don't know how I'm going to get enough gas in the airplane to fly through the Pacific, and I don't know how I'll get the time off of JetBlue. But the great thing about being in the United States is you can figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
If you're willing to make a sacrifice and really put your mind to it,
You can do it.
you can do it. So flew it around the world, came back, and then everybody's saying, what's next? Would you do that
Wait,
again?
how did you fly it around the world?
Yeah.
So went up through Canada, down to the Azores, up to France, through Germany, down through Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, down to Sri Lanka, the Philippines, and then I was going to go down to Australia and then pick the islands coming back to the States because there's only about 1,200 miles between stops. But I upset the people when I was flying over Subang, deviating for thunderstorms, and I took a turn without permission, so I got spanked for that pretty bad. And they said, your airplane will not be allowed back in Indonesia's airspace.
Oh no.
So I had to go up through up to Manila, over to Guam, to Majuro, to Honolulu and back. And the bad thing about that, those are all 2,000-mile legs. So in a Bonanza at about 160 miles per hour the airplane was slow because the amount of gas that I had to carry.
How much gas were you carrying?
We're too close to the FAA for me to say that in public. Oh, wait, I had P for plenty. I had just enough.
There you go.
A lot. So those were all like 15-hour legs, and I remember taking off out of Majuro going to Honolulu. I'm thinking I've only got 2 more legs till I get back to the States, and I go to engage the autopilot, and the autopilot's like saying, "No, I ain't playing today."
Oh,
so
fun.
15 hours hand flying,
Wow.
11 hours during the daytime and 4 hours at night over the Pacific after sitting in the seat for 11 hours. And I'm thinking,
Excuse me, chills.
what am I doing out here? And landed in Hawaii. We fixed the autopilot, flew back to the States. So
Okay.
it was a very interesting trip, but I wouldn't do it again in a GA airplane only because of the amount of hassle with permits and clearances. And, with GPS, navigating is easy. 30 years ago, before Loran, those guys had to really think about how they're navigating. So navigation is easy now, but unfortunately, a lot of the countries that I went to don't like Americans anymore. So it's pretty stressful going through parts of the world in a GA airplane by yourself.
No, absolutely. I think the moral of the story here with you guys is that aviation begins here.
Absolutely.
I think
It's here.
It's not possible to make epic journeys around the world or fly super cool stealth planes if it's just something that you do just because of the money, which I think unfortunately we see a lot more of now. So with
it's a passion.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely. You guys are just two of the most fascinating individuals I think I've ever met.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I could literally spend the entire week just hanging out with you and hearing your stories because you are just so inspiring. You make me want to just go fly a 117. Like I don't know what's next on the horizon for me in terms of my personal aviation journey, but you guys definitely keep it alive. And that's why I wanted you here today to talk about it so that you could inspire future aviators and let people know that if you have it here, you will overcome.
And I think the important thing, at least for me, when I look back, the valuable is meeting other aviators. And I say aviators instead of pilots because they're the people like us that
Yes.
that this is our passion.
Yep.
I used to smile packing my suitcase going to work. I still do, but and I love it. Well, maybe not on a red eye. That could be stretching. But I love it. I love it more now than I did before because I think I've gotten better at it. I know my abilities and stuff. And for me now, it's all about the Fellowship of Airmen and meeting guys like Rick and comparing stories and helping other people get to the dream.
Oh, absolutely. I think paying it forward
Paying
is
it forward.
huge because
Yeah.
none of us got here. None of us has
Yeah.
gotten here without the help of wonderful people who have guided us along the way, whether it was through, hey, I've got a twin engine.
Come fly with me.
Come fly with me so you could build some twin time.
Yep. Or scholarship opportunities,
Scholarship
which we just finished talking about.
Yeah, any of that.
Yeah.
And you guys are just two of the most genuine people I've ever met.
Well, thank you.
Stories
appreciate
like
that.
y'all's are what inspire
Yeah.
aviators like me who are young and
Absolutely.
starting
Yeah.
out, so that's
And-
something that's
And
important.
we're fortunate, and I think listening to Rick's story, he's had some breaks, and I have as well.
Right.
But if you work hard, you get your ratings. I had no idea when I was in college thinking, I'm going to fly astronauts, I'm going to work for the president, I've been to, I think, 68 countries now, done
Wow,
takeoff
that's
and
amazing.
landings, and have been all over the world, and
Yeah.
had no idea. But if you stick with it and have a passion for it, it comes.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, thank you guys so much
Yes,
for
thank
joining
y'all
us
so,
today.
Thank you.
so
Thanks for
much.
having us.
For taking the time to come and speak with us. And thank you guys for liking this content, subscribing, sharing. Thank you to our sponsors. We've
Yes,
got
who do we have here?
Flying Eyes, of course, Clemens Insurance. We've got
67 Designs,
Mhm.
Z-Vision.
Colton Mortgage. They'll help you with all your residential mortgage needs. And MPS Protects.
At mpsprotects.com.
You guys are wonderful and amazing. You guys are wonderful, amazing. We'll see
Yes.
you all next time.
In the hangar.